with them. They also do something really interesting in the healing where they connect to the bone and they work on running energy through the bones, which is a little different than let's say acupuncture or TCM, where you're doing a meridian type pathway. They are thinking about the bone marrow channels and how things run in the bones. And that's the same thing in the fighting. They're looking to affect your internal flow of your internal rivers inside your bones. So it's a really deep art. And I would argue that there's probably not many masters left on the planet that even know the depths of this art. I think we have some that know a lot, but I think this goes much deeper than we can even begin to imagine. It's also, Cimande is kind of like an order, like a fraternity, kind of like a Freemasonry. You know, if you were accepted into a Cimande school, you were already respected, if you will. And that opened doors for you. And I think that's how they also kept peace in Indonesia. So instead of going to war, they would just send their silat players to discuss and to make friends and to make camaraderie, to establish trade routes and things like that. And I think that makes sense if you look at how, if this stuff came from Persia, so that they could establish trade lines between the Middle East, Mecca, and Indonesia, you know, which they still exist today, basically, but now it's just done with airplanes and, you know, cargo boats and things like that, trains. But back then, I mean, the Silk Road is still around. It's just a different format now. So, yeah, Cimande is a very incredible art, but also incredibly simple. And so a lot of times what happens is people want to learn Cimande. They start to learn Cimande, and, you know, let's say, like, for example, it happens to all of us who come from like a background of Sarak. You know, we get Juru 1, oh, this is awesome. You know, Juru 2, oh my God, I got all this stuff. Juru 3, oh wow, there's all these things, right? Then you come to Cimande and they go, okay, Juru 1. You know? And you're like, what do you mean Juru 1? That's one motion, right? Juru 2, Juru 3, right? But what happens is it forces you as a student to really simplify things and like cut out the fat and really go deep into something to really study it. So then when you go back to your Sarak, you go, oh, this is one piece. This is another 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 piece. It's almost like you learn to go frame by frame. So I can tell you for sure, at least in my case, the more I studied my Cimande, the better I got at Sarak. And so I think it's really good to find somebody who can teach it to you, or at least teach you the principles. There are some good people out there. Guru Jerry Jacobs is fantastic. There's a couple Indonesian masters in the U.S. that know it. Babak Sujadi knows a form of Cimande. There's also Pendekar Sanders. He knows his way. I don't like to say that that's the only way, because there's not. There's a lot of lineages, like I told you. And I have my reservations, because some things I learned from my Cimande teachers is very different than, let's say, what Pendekar Sanders is teaching. There's a lot of room for interpretation. You know, there's a lot of things that have been changed, or I want to say made up. And then there's stuff that's the old way, you know. So you basically, you know, you have to decipher for yourself and get to know people. I can tell you for a fact, Uncle Willem de Tours does know Cimande. And if you ask him, and he's generous enough to show you, he will show you, you know. I know he keeps it kind of reserved for his students that he cares about and his family. But it's a fantastic thing to learn. And the most important thing is to think of your Cimande more like all the silat, lower, slower, and stronger. And like I said, like for example, if you have this motion, right? It's not just, you know, doing it as fast as possible, right? It's more like understanding at all the ranges of it, all the micro movements involved in empowering and strengthening all the tendons and all the fascia to get that motion done appropriately. The best thing I can kind of tell you, it's kind of like like when you're strength training and you're learning how to train partially at different levels. And I think that's something that you get when you study Cimande. You understand on a micro level all the intricacies of how to move one movement. That's the best way I can look at it. It's very similar and simple, like you see Xingyi in Chinese martial art. It reminds me of Baiji Chuan a little bit when you look at Baiji Chuan. Again, I'm not an expert in those arts, but I can see the common ground. Another important aspect in Cimande is they combine all the jurus with the breath work. You're always working on your breathing, much like pranayama or qigong. So it's very connected energetically. In fact, for a lot of Westerners, it might be boring because the first while that you're training, you're not really learning a technique or anything that you might be used to in the West. You're just learning how to breathe, you're learning how to move, you're learning how to do isometric contractions and when to do those isometric contractions. These are things that you got to go through that to understand how to know your body more. So anyhow, this is part one. I'll make some more for you, but